Welcome back to Conversations with Boston School Psychologists, building safe and supportive schools, one conversation at a time. In today's episode, we welcome Annastasia Martineau and Dr. Carolyn Hall. Thank you so much for joining us today. They are the chairs of the BHS Equity Committee. And so we're going to be talking about the BHS Equity Committee today. And I just want to give a brief overview that BHS leverages distributed leadership, empowering school psychologists to view themselves as leaders of system changes in schools and communities. One structure that has been particularly helpful in uplifting this model is committees designated to specific areas of work, such as equity, multilingual, research, communication, sunshine, and more. So in today's conversation, we're going to hear more about the Equity Committee, and let's get started. So the first question is just to simply provide an introduction. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about your professional background, and then we'll move on to questions about equity.
Sure. So my name is Annastasia Martineau. I'm a school psychologist in Boston Public Schools. I work specifically in early education. So the school I work at right now is K0, so our 3-year-olds up through first grade, so our 6 and 7-year-olds. I have a focus in my practice on inclusive practices for LGBT families and students, as well as early literacy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carolyn Hall. Currently, I'm in the role of CBHM Program Director. But previously, I've also worked as a school psychologist in Boston Public Schools. And over the years, I've had numerous roles within this equity committee, both as a co-chair and now supporting the work as an admin.
Fantastic. So what has inspired the creation of this equity committee, and what are the goals guiding this work?
I can get us started. This committee dates back to 2020. Around that time, there was a lot of uncertainty happening, both with regard to current events in our world, but also with regard to the global pandemic. It's hard to believe that it's been over 5 years since we had large-scale school shutdowns. But what we know during that time, that one thing that was at the forefront of our mind was trying to mitigate the potential for amplifying inequities because of those school closures. So we wanted to have a place where educators specific to our department could come together to kind of collaboratively problem solve, but also have these challenging conversations together.
Absolutely. And Annastasia, do you want to add to that as well?
Yeah, so I feel like being in this committee is really just being in community, and our community is really what drives everything. I don't really feel like I'm leading anything by doing this. I don't. I feel like I'm facilitating our community leading itself to create the change that they need. There's so many times where like I have a plan going into the meeting and there's something that's going on in our community or with like families and someone brings it to our meeting and we have to go in a different direction. And I think that's the beauty of like having that kind of flexibility where we're driven by need. We're not necessarily driven by what the people in charge want to do that day. And so I think that's really important.
Do we want to now get into more specifics? We've talked broadly about the goals, but do we want to talk about some of the specific work that the Equity Committee is doing, some of the examples of data you're looking at, some things you're advocating for, some things you've done in the past, some actionable steps you've taken, and just talking generally about what the committee looks like. Is it all school psychologists? What's the overview of it?
I can start. I think that when I joined this work in 2021, the previous year, there was a department survey that was completed. So as a department, we're always trying to get a pulse on what our staff's needs are at the time. So there was a climate survey that came out. So one of the first tasks of the Equity Committee was to review that survey data together to identify what are the goals that we have that we want to be working on together in this space. Before we get ahead of ourselves, I do want to share a little bit about the just overall structure of the committee in terms of the Equity Committee and most of the committees in our department are opt-in for staff. They're held during the school day. So if people build that into their schedule within their typical workday, they can attend the committee meetings. They're held monthly. There are certain committees that are mandatory as part of your job role. So, for example, the multilingual committee, because there are areas of that work that is specific and unique, that is a requirement. But the equity committee, for example, is really a place where you can go if one month you just feel like there's something top of mind, but we do encourage continuous participation when possible, just for coherence. We also do a lot of work to set the stage for shared norms to make the meetings a productive space. So just to sort of summarize, the committee meets monthly, and some of the core features of our work are we help to plan job-embedded PD that happens at our monthly staff meetings. We also help to facilitate shared learning for our staff. So if we have a particularly meaningful conversation in our small committee group, sometimes we'll bring that to the larger group when we meet as an entire department. We've also led the work of choosing which books we're going to do for department book studies. So just to name a few, but I'm sure you can think of others, Anastasia.
Yeah, thank you so much for giving us that overview. And you go ahead, Annastasia.
Yeah, I just want to talk about some of the specific things that I've gotten to be a part of over the past few years. So we have really dived into everything from immigration law. We've done a lot with like calling in and calling out culture. We've looked at equitable assessment, whether that's for our students of color, our multilingual learners, all sorts of like diverse families, as well as for me personally, I've done a lot looking at the LGBTQ plus policy in our district.
That's fantastic. And so you've been looking at a lot of different major issues that parents and students go through. And so why don't you tell me a little bit of some of the actionable steps and some of the data that you're looking for and some of the practical tips maybe that you would give to school psychologists who are also considering creating an equity committee? What would that look like?
I'm so glad you went there, Tim, because that is some of the feedback that we've gotten around this work is, and I also think it's important to have that foundation, but some of the feedback that we've received from our staff is that we've done a lot of that theoretical foundation. So we've set the stage, we've done the shared reading, we've kind of highlighted these challenges in the field, within the field of school psychology, some of the different ways that inequity can show up. But now we're at a place where what we're hearing is that what do we do about it? So one of my favorite things to talk about that we've kind of started to think about is equity in action. So what are these small practices that over time turn into big practices that help us facilitate change? So for example, we've done a lot of reflecting on who we are as a person, our identities, and how that shows up in our work, but also thinking about what are the specific areas that are in our sphere of control. So when we think about the big parts of our work, so counseling, assessment, consultation, interviews, we kind of try to highlight specific areas of our work to think about, are we selecting tools that are culturally responsive and reflective of the students that we work with? Have they been studied with populations of students that look like our students that we serve here in Boston Public Schools? So one of the projects that we're working on is we're really drilling down into our family interview procedure, because for every comprehensive psych report, we should have some sort of parent or
interview.
family contact.
Yes.
So if you want to tell us a little bit about that, I know that's been one of your passion projects.
So this was one of the big projects we had for last year. So we do have kind of like two subcommittees. One of them is our strategic plan committee, and then one of them kind of looks at the PD that we're doing during our staff meetings. And so for our strategic plan committee this year, we really wanted to come up with a tangible that we could share out starting in our department. And then hopefully next year, we're going to be disseminating across the district. But we partnered specifically with our multilingual committee in BPS or in BHS because it's really important that when we're talking about equitable interviews that we are making them accessible both in all languages and just for all languages. So there's different things that we might ask to a student who is speaking different languages at home. We might want to know, how often do you speak this language over the other, or just like what resources the parent needs in like different languages. And so our multilingual committee is amazing, and they've been really, really supportive and collaborative this year in making sure that we can have this equitable interview process, and they know things that we don't know. So,
and that's being incorporated into every school psychologist practice, these culturally responsive interview questions. So kudos to Boston Public Schools. And it sounds like you are collaborating with other committees, other districts. You mentioned one, the
our
multilingual committee. Is there any other departments or committees that you are collaborating with?
Yeah, so actually on a school-based level, and this is something that um, I would really like to expand upon, and I know other school psychologists are also doing this work as well. My individual school has an ERT team, so it's our equity response team. Um, and it was something that through my work with the Equity Committee at BHS, my school leaders invited me to have a seat on our school-based team. And so if you've ever heard the phrase, nothing about us without us, school psychologists, we really have such a deep knowledge base that I think sometimes goes unused at schools. And so I'm so lucky to be at such a wonderful school that really allows me to bring in my perspective. Um, and I think that's something that I really want to see more psychologists do moving forward.
And you're also a leader at your school when it comes to this equity. So it's not just the equity committee for the behavioral health services department, but you're also taking a lead at your school and looking at some of the data there as well, right?
Yes.
That's wonderful. So we're going to move to the next portion of our podcast episode, which is, can you share examples of how school psychologists are embedding the work of your committee? Can you share an example of how the committee's work has made a difference for students, families, or schools?
So one thing I'd really like to share, and I actually have to shout out John Murray, who I know just had his interview. Part of what came out of our equity committee was the idea of having book clubs. And so we actually had our first book club last year. It was on the book Enrique's Journey. It was about immigration and some of the things that our students who are also immigrants face. And the way that it was done was that we had to come up with a work product. So we weren't just reading the book, we had to actually do something. And so I was able to, along with my school social worker, we both did full train the trainer, know your rights with the Massachusetts Immigration and Refugee Alliance, MIRA. And then we were able to give this presentation to all of our staff and all of our families at our school.
That's wonderful.
Wow, Annastasia, that's amazing.
Yeah.
One thing that I would add to that is in a similar fashion in terms of the train the trainer. Last year, our department brought in Dr. Charles Barrett. So another way that I see this work living out is both with our grad students, but also with our BPS students. So our district over the last 4 years has been building out a way to mobilize the NASP Exposure Project. And one of the core features of the NASP Exposure Project is to increase diversity in the field of school psychology. So what the numbers tell us is that our field is primarily white women. So we are really trying to be a part of exposing more people. Because what we know is that a lot of people find the field of school psychology sort of by happenstance. So we want to kind of start the conversation a little bit sooner so that when students are starting to explore different career paths, they might consider joining the field of school psychology. So we partner with our university committees to have every single grad student that trains in Boston give at least one presentation on the NASP Exposure Project. And I think we'll highlight that, and I think that conversation might deserve its own episode.
And just to clarify, who are they presenting to? High school students in Boston Public Schools?
Yeah, and if they don't have access to a population of high schoolers, we do allow them to have those conversations with middle schoolers. We've also had opportunities where they've gone into local community colleges. So yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. We're getting the word out. Yeah, go ahead.
I do want to just share about that. I think it's really important to our committee the way that we are intentionally bringing other people into our space, because honestly, if the only people doing the work are people that look like us, then the work isn't getting done.
That's a great point. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. So what are some of the milestones in the committee?
I can think of one, and I want to shout out Annastasia for this one. Then it relates directly to the NASP Exposure Project. I think that it's that if you're not seeing it happen, sometimes you have to start somewhere. So you saw something that you thought could be better and you reached out to the person in charge and you helped create change. So
I
let's hear about
did.
it.
Shout out to Charles Barrett. I DM'd him on Instagram. It was my internship year. So I wasn't even a full school psych yet. But we were giving a NASPA exposure project presentation, and it was myself and another intern, and someone came up to us afterwards and was like, hey, I'm non-binary. Like, are there any school psychologists that are non-binary? And we were sitting there, both two queer people, being like, wow, we didn't even think about that, and that's the community with which we identify. And so I literally DM'd Charles on Instagram and I was like, hey, I would love to see if we can find some data about this. It's really important to me to bring trans and non-binary school psychologists specifically into our field. And so we were able to really update the whole presentation. We were able to seek feedback from different people on even just things as like, what are the body shapes of like people we're using when we're representing these data? And so we were able to create an updated version of the NASP Exposure Project, as well as just update some of the demographic data that NASP members give.
That's wonderful. Carolyn, do you want to add some of the achievements that the committee has accomplished?
Yeah, I think that, one thing that I'm proud of is the strategic plan. I think that sometimes it's hard to really see all that you've accomplished unless you take a minute to kind of really be thoughtful and planful. So, in looking at what we've done in the first few years of our committee, it's helping us to think about what our goals are for the future. I think that these permanent work products, I think about when we're able to bring equity into conversations more explicitly, so it's at the forefront. And I think the work that we do with other committees from our university committee, I'm thinking about our newest committee is our AI committee. So thinking about how can we reduce bias when we're using these new tools and how do we study them and communicate them. So I think that this work doesn't happen in a silo. It really happens throughout all the different work that we do. And in terms of some of our big accomplishments, I think that we also have presented on the work of our committee on a national platform. A couple of years ago, we did a NASP presentation on just the structure of our committee, how we've kind of created a platform to have these conversations in a way that other districts, to my knowledge, haven't yet. So that was really exciting to me as well.
That's wonderful. I did not know that. That's fantastic. So this is the last question, and it's kind of looking forward now. What are some of your goals for the committee to accomplish in the future?
I think a big goal for me moving forward is to really lean in on that community connection, not only within our little community of school psychologists in the district, but also really making sure that we have the input from students, from families, um, from community members that are experiencing the things that we're talking about firsthand and making sure that we're really centering their voices. And then I think, like I mentioned before, really making sure that, yes, we've created all of these beautiful resources, but that we're working to disseminate them to the district. So, like, making sure they're getting out to all school principals, making sure that we're including our school counseling department, our social work department in the work that we do.
Yeah. So I echo everything Annastasia just said. The few things that I would add is I would love to see more participation. So it isn't opt-in, and I know that school psychs time is of the essence. Or one of the biggest complaints that we hear in the field is there's just not enough hours in the day to get our job done. So it means a lot when people carve out that time every month to come and have these conversations with us. I'd love to see more participation on our committee, but I also would like to see our folks take that one step further and do what Anastasia's doing, and then helping to facilitate this work on the school level. I think that if we were to have a model for people to be able to replicate that, we would have a larger reach. And then finally, just continuing to think of different ways to get the word out there of the work that we're doing, as well as the tangible products that we've produced as a committee.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. This was so much fun to speak with you both about the Equity Committee, and you are doing such great work. So congratulations, kudos to both of you, and keep up the great work. And thank you, the viewer, for watching Conversations with Boston School Psychologists, one conversation at a time. Please follow us on socials, Boston School Psychs, and visit our website, bostonschoolpsychs.com, to learn more about our work. Join our next conversation to learn more about resources and tips for creating safe and supportive schools.